Last week I was looking for something small and lightweight to browse and edit some files through a browser. I immediately thought of the good old days using Webmin. Now, if you're not familiar with Webmin, Webmin is a web-based system administration tool for Linux. And while using it, I could do anything I needed on Linux, and it was a great way to get started learning Linux as a beginner. As I grew more comfortable with Linux, I realized that I didn't need Webmin anymore. I found that I could start to do most things through a terminal, but my need for a file-based browser didn't change. I just ended up doing it the hard way, still through a terminal. And then, many years later, I started using Nextcloud, but primarily as a replacement for Dropbox. This too gave me a file browser within a browser so that I can modify, edit, change, and delete files if I'd like. And while it works great and it comes with a lot of features, there are lots of features I actually don't need if I just need to browse files. And that's when I started searching for a new file browser. I wanted one that's lightweight, not bloated, and does one thing well. That's when I discovered File Browser. Pretty original name, huh? So File Browser is a self-hosted web interface to access all of your files through the web. It comes with all the features you'd expect from a file browser and a few more. You can browse files and folders, read the contents of files, or even get previews, create and edit files and folders, move, copy, delete files and folders, download files and folders from your server to your device, and upload files from your device to your server. Oh, and did I mention it has authentication and you can share too? Maybe this is sounding more and more like a Dropbox replacement. Another awesome thing about this is it's able to do this inside of a tiny Docker container, one that's only 14 megabytes. It's pretty incredible for such a small package. Yes, we're gonna set this up using Docker. So probably worth mentioning then that you'll need some sort of containerization platform to run this container. We'll cover plain old Docker and Docker Compose, but feel free to spin this up using Rancher, Portainer, Unraid, Open Media Vault, or any other platform that has Docker or Containerd, because it should work on any platform running one of those containerization engines, whether that be on your workstation, server, a NAS, or even a Raspberry Pi. Also, like the rest of my videos, all of the documentation and all of the configuration we covered today will be in the description below. And if that sounds good to you, give this video a thumbs up and let's continue to take a look at File Browser. So today, we're gonna use Docker Compose to set this up. We're using Docker Compose because it's easy and it's repeatable. And it allows me to share my configuration with you so that all you have to do is copy and paste. And if you need help setting up Docker and Docker Compose, feel free to see the link in the description of this video. Then you'll want to make sure that Docker and Docker Compose can actually run on your system. You can check this by running docker-v and seeing output, and then running docker-compose-v and seeing output. If you do, you're in a good spot. If not, see my documentation on how to get those installed and configured. Next, we'll want to create a folder. I'm going to create a directory called File Browser. Now this will hold my Docker Compose file, as well as some data this container needs to persist. So after you create it, cd into it. Next, we'll want to create a docker-compose YAML file. You can do that simply by typing touch docker-compose.yml. And if we do an ls, we should see just that file in there. And then you'll want to edit that file. But I recommend doing this in an editor first and then pasting the contents into that file. So I've opened up my Docker Compose file with VS Code, where you can see this is only 15 lines in config, and that's really all it takes to get started. I've already figured this out, and there's actually one more thing we'll need to do before we spin this up, but let's talk about some of these properties. So this is a typical Docker Compose file. We're saying use version 3, and we're creating a service or a stack, and I'm going to name it file-browser. Now this can be anything you want. I typically name it the name of the service. Then we're going to say to use an image. So this is a Docker image we're going to use from the Docker registry. And we're saying use the image file browser/file browser. So that's the org file browser and the image name or the repository name of file browser. Next, we're naming the container. So this is the name of the container when it spins up. And I'm naming it file-browser. Now I typically name this the same as the service, but there's only one service in this stack, so it's a lot of redundancy. And next you'll need to set user permissions. And this is needed for permissions to read and write to the files within this container, and for permissions to browse and create files on the file system of that device. So this user ID should be the user ID that you're going to spin this container up with. And so how did I know it was ID 1000 and a group of 1000? Well, if we go back into our terminal and we type in ID, we should see the UID and the GID of the currently signed in user. So I'm going to sign in using this account called server admin, and it's also the same account that I'll use when I spin up this Docker image or Docker container. So I can see here my UID is 1000 and my GID is 1000. Now you might have different values there, but just plug those into here. And next we're going to take care of some ports. So this is hosted on port 80 on the inside. And the port you choose to host it on the outside, is really up to you. I'm choosing 8081. It's because I have something hosted on 80 already, and 8081 was about as creative as I could get. So next we're gonna mount some volumes. And this part was a little bit tricky. So the first volume we're mounting, I'm saying on the left side, mount home/server admin root to /srv. And so this is actually the path that file browser is going to serve out through the browser. So for me, I'm saying take everything from the server admin profile and serve it out. And we'll see that here in a little bit. But that maps to /srv within the container. So on the left side, you just want to think about, on this host system, what path do I want to serve out over the web, over a browser? You might want to go as far as home, and you might want to go as far as root. But I'm not going to go that far. I'm just going to say the path to my profile. And this can be adjusted later. I recommend taking a more restrictive approach and then loosening it up later on if your needs change. And this next one is just a path to the file browser database file. So on the inside, they have their database on the root /database.db. And then on our host's side, we just need a path of where this will end up living. And there's one more thing we'll talk about right before we spin this up, but let's cover the rest real quick. So restart and list top, this is a typical flag you set on this container to basically saying, restart the container unless I stop it myself. So if the container's crashing or has an error, it'll keep trying to restart itself. And then security options, this is one I typically place, no new privileges equals true. And this is just a security option for the container, so privileges can't be escalated or changed. And now, before we start this up, something that caught me off guard for a little bit. It's actually in their documentation, but it's not entirely clear the way they explain it. What they say in their documentation is that if this is a new install or a new container instantiation, this file must exist before the container is started. Otherwise, it tries to create a folder to this file. It's really odd, but I've seen it before in Docker. So what we have to do is actually create a file called filebrowser.db in this path. So let's go back to the terminal, do an ls to make sure that nothing's here. Then we'll do a touch filebrowser.db, and then do an ls to make sure we have it there. Now, if you did this before and you're getting an error saying that filebrowser.db is a folder and the container's crashing, that's the problem. And if it did create a filebrowser.db folder, just remove that folder and run this command we're about to run again. So now that we have our Docker YAML file, let's actually edit this Docker Compose file. Let's take all of our contents and paste them in there. Let's save. And then we'll run docker-compose up-d-force-recreate. Now we know we're not recreating this container. I've said in my previous videos, I use the same command because it works on the first run and the 100th run. So I never have to remember different commands to start it up. But we'll run this command and this should spin it up. So it's creating that service. If we run a Docker PS, we should see file browser running, and it's healthy, created 7 seconds ago. And now we should be able to go to a web browser on port 8081 and see file browser. And if you browse there, here it is. So what's our username and password? The default username and password is admin. So let's sign into there and we see a bunch of files. Okay, so before we get started and dive in looking at this, first let's change our password. So let's go into settings, then we'll go into global settings. First we change to dark mode. I know, priorities. Then we go to user management and let's change our password here. Okay, and after your password's saved and updated, there we go. Hit a refresh and now we have dark mode. So back to home or my files where we were when we signed in. You can see this looks pretty familiar. This is actually the home directory of one of my servers. And this is actually one that's running Portainer. So let's check things out really quick. So let's do a little bit of inception here. So here's the folder file browser that we created that has our Docker Compose file. So we can browse around, we can edit this file if we like, and we can make changes to this file. This is really cool. So you get a YAML editor here. Let's make that a little bit bigger. And you can see I could make changes to this file, 8081 to 8082, and I can save it. Now that's actually not going to change anything on this service, but I wanted to show you really quick that we can edit this file within a browser. Go back really quick, do an ls, and let's cat out Docker Compose. And you can see here, 8082. So cool, we can edit files through a browser. So let's go back here. Let's actually change this back because I want this 8081. Save this file and close out. We zoom back out. And so since we have a file browser inside of a web browser, let's do some typical stuff. So let's create a new folder, test folder. I'm gonna create a test folder. So I created one. Feels lonely in here. That's actually nice. They navigate into the folder as soon as you create it. Nice touch. Let's create a new file, test file .doc x. And it actually opens the file for you too. This is a test doc. Hopefully this saves. Let's add an emoji. Okay, so let's save this file. Let's close this file out. Can we preview this file? I don't think we can preview this file. So we saved it. Now let's see some of the other options we have. So let's copy this file. We want to copy this file to where? Choose the place to copy your file. Okay, so let's choose. I'm going to go right back up one directory to our home directory. So it copied it. Nice. It copied it here, and it actually navigated you there too. Super nice. Nice touch. That's exactly what I was going to do afterwards. So they really thought about this. So we have this test file that we just copied here, and we could see my message. Let's close it out. Let's actually now delete this file. Let's delete it. And it's gone. Okay, so let's go back into our test folder. There's the original file. We can download this file now. Ah, cool. So we can archive it. So let's zip it up. So I downloaded that file. Open it up with 7-zip. And Microsoft Word is complaining because it's not a valid docx file, which totally makes sense because I didn't have the required metadata for a docx file. It's getting too fancy. Anyways, I don't have the proper XML-like or whatever syntax in the file. Anyways, let's pretend that didn't happen. Let's create a new file. Actually, let's take this file, copy the contents out, create a new file, test.txt. We're not going to get too fancy this time. Create it, paste those contents in, save it, close it. Now let's download it. Download this file. Download the wrong one. Now we'll download this file, test.txt. Open it with Notepad. I still got the extension wrong because it's txt, I know. But notepad.exe is okay with it. So here's our test doc. It's pretty cool. So we created a file on a server through a browser and then downloaded that file here. So I know this is pretty basic stuff, but this is pretty powerful, this web browser. So let's do some other stuff. Let's say, for instance, I want to upload files to this directory. So let's choose to upload a file. Then let's choose to upload that file. There we go. And we get a file preview. Cool. So all your base R belong to us. Do we get a better preview than that? I thought we did. We go to info? No? Oh, there we go. So if we double click it, now we get a file preview. I don't know why cats are saying all your base R belong to us. Anyways, so pretty cool. We get a file preview from the folder, and then we get another file preview if we open it up without downloading. Awesome. Let's get a higher quality image just to see. Okay, so let's upload another file. Gonna grab my Twitter background. We can see we get the preview there. If we double click, we get a preview there. Pretty awesome. So that's actually, oh, I have another preview open. Okay. 2 modals open. I'm okay with that. Should close both modals. When you open one modal, the next modal should be closed. But anyway, So pretty cool. This has so far exceeded a lot of my expectations. I didn't have high expectations because I don't have a lot of requirements. Basically, I want to be able to edit files and download files and upload files from the web. So where this comes in handy for me is actually in Kubernetes, because sometimes you have to mount a persistent volume claim to a container and then edit those files, usually through the container that's attached to it. Well, if you attach this container to it, then you can edit those files right from a browser. And I'm familiar with kube control commands and kube control copy and edit and how to exec into that pod and make those file changes, but a lot of people aren't. And that's where something like this really shines. So another thing I mentioned, because we said, oh, multi-select. Okay, multi-select, cool. I got multi-select, all right. Discovered a new feature, multi-select, download, zip it up, and they're all in there. Awesome. Well, discovered a new feature. So another thing that I mentioned is that this could possibly be used as a Dropbox replacement too. So how could that be? Let's go back to my files, go back into this test folder, and let's actually click on the share button. So the share button is actually creating a share and a link to this file so that you can share it if you like. So I'm going to say the share duration is 1 day, and I'm not going to put a password on it, but you could put a password. So let's share. And here's the share ID, and let's copy that to our clipboard. So let's actually see what was copied to our clipboard. So here's what's copied to our clipboard, which is pretty cool. So this actually copied a link to my clipboard to the name of my server with the path to the share with the share ID. So let's see if we open this up in Firefox. I open it up in incognito or in private, and let's go to this URL, and here's the file that we can download. Even a QR code to it. Pretty awesome. So I can download this file and open it up, and here's the file. Pretty awesome. This is pretty cool. Okay, so let's go back and put a password on that share. So let's create a new share. Let's share this. Oh, we get share management right here. Should be an icon. Should be an icon on there, just telling me that that's shared, because it's hard to discover that. There might be another section to discover shares and manage shares. But that's pretty cool right here. So let's delete that old share. Delete. Let's create another share that only has, let's say, a 30-second duration. 30 seconds. And let's put in an optional password. And let's share it out. Let's copy this clipboard. Let's go back to Firefox. Try to get to that share. Put in our password. And we get to it. Pretty awesome. But remember, I put a 30-second timer on there. So let's let that timer expire. And if you go back after 30 seconds, this URL is invalid. Pretty awesome, pretty awesome. And if we go back to here now in the share, refresh this share, the share is gone. Pretty sweet, that's pretty sweet, I like it. Okay, so that was pretty awesome with file sharing. So you could see how that could be pretty powerful to be able to share files with people too. But you may not want to do that, just know that it's there in case you do. So we didn't cover settings because settings are traditionally boring. Not boring to me, I like to look at them and figure them out, but they are to some. So we'll go through them real quick. So in profile settings, you can choose whether or not to hide dot files, so those are hidden files. Use single clicks rather than double clicks. I don't mind double clicks on the web. Typically I don't. I'm not a double clicker on the web. I know some people that double click links. I'm like, whoa, where have you been for 20 years? But anyways, you can change a single click to a double click if you want here. I don't mind it because you're double clicking on a folder as if you were on a file system on a desktop. Share management, here's share management, exactly what I was talking about. So if we had open shares here, let's create one. Share, 11 hours, sure. Go back to settings, here's our share management, super nice. So we can manage our share here. If I didn't want to share this anymore, I can delete the share. I won't delete the file, that'll just delete the share. I love how they have the function name right here too. So delete the share, no more shares. Some global settings, a lot of settings in here for permissions. This is one I would probably make sure that you don't turn on. Allow users to sign up. Keep this unchecked, just don't touch it. Unless you want people to create accounts within File Browser to be able to access files. So I wouldn't even check that. Only check it if you know what you're doing and you have a public file share that you don't really care about. Anyways, it's there if you need it. Most likely you won't. Here's where we would change the theme. We changed it to dark. You can change it back to light. Here's a command runner. In here, you have hooks into different events. And you can execute additional commands after this event runs. So basically hooks for before and after. So if you wanted to do something after a copy, you could, or if you wanted to do something after delete, you could, after rename, after save. So you can see all these events here, and they just give you hooks to be able to hook into that event and run a command before or after. So pretty cool. Definitely a developer feature right there. I like it. And here are user default settings. This includes ones that get created or that you create, but they're default permissions for new users. I don't need to change anything here because I'm the only user and I'm the administrator. But if you were going to create new users, here's where user management is, and here's where we are. So you could create a new user, give it a password, apply a scope to it. We only have one scope. And then apply specific permissions to it, and then save that user. So this would be handy if you had a friend who you wanted to access some of your files. You could create an account for them, limit the things they're able to do, like create, delete, edit, execute, rename, or share, and then save the permissions for that user. So these permissions right here would only give that user the permission to download. But if they're only downloading single files, I would recommend using the share feature. Let's delete this user before I forget. So File Browser is actually really awesome. It's exactly what I want from a file browser. It's tiny, it's light, it's efficient, and allows me to do everything I would normally do inside of a traditional file browser inside of the web. It also has nice perks like having the ability to create an account and having the ability to share. So, will you use this? Are you using something else for file-based access through the web? Do you still use Webmin? If so, let me know in the comments section below. And remember, if you found anything in this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. The software that we were running just keeps getting better. Like it keeps getting better. Like things, open source things keep coming from everywhere, every direction, new ways to solve it. And now like all of these tiny little niche projects back in the day now have competitors that are other open source solutions. It's just getting better. Software is making everything awesome. I think. But you know, I'm a little jaded. I mean, I'm a software developer, so so I'm excited about software. But at the end of the day, like I mean, don't get me wrong. We need hardware to run all of this on. Without hardware, it wouldn't be possible. But man, software makes everything awesome. It just breathes new life into systems that we thought one day weren't going to be used anymore, and all of a sudden we're using them again because the software keeps getting better. So.